AITA for not helping my sister financially after she spent all her savings on a business venture. I, 29M, have a younger sister, Sarah, 26F. Growing up, we were always very close. We shared everything, secrets, toys, books, you name it. Our parents made sure we were always supported, and I've always tried to be there for her. I'm not going to lie. I'm proud of how well I've been doing for myself. I've been working at a good company for a few years, making decent money, and I've also been able to save up enough to buy my first home last year. Things started to change a few months ago. Sarah came to me one evening, excited about a new business venture she was starting. She told me she had spent the last few months researching this amazing investment opportunity, and she was convinced it was going to make her a lot of money. The idea was that she would be selling luxury skincare products, and she'd be running everything herself. She assured me that all the research was done and that she'd even hired a consultant to help her get started. At first, I wasn't sure what to think. I've never been one to invest in these kinds of things. To me, it sounded like one of those pyramid schemes or some sort of get-rich-quick scam that never ends well. But I didn't want to crush her excitement. She seemed so sure of herself, and I thought if it worked out, I'd be happy for her. However, I told her to be cautious and asked her how she planned to make sure she wasn't just throwing her money away. She reassured me that everything was legitimate. "I'm being careful," she said. "I've done my homework. I'll be fine." Over the next couple of months, Sarah continued to gush about her new business. She was constantly talking about how well things were going, how she had a growing customer base, how much she was learning. But there were little things that didn't sit right with me. She'd mentioned how much she had spent on marketing materials, website development, and influencer partnerships, all things that cost a lot of money up front but didn't guarantee anything in return. Still, I kept my concerns to myself. Then, about a month ago, Sarah hit me with a bombshell. She told me she had completely drained her savings account, every last dollar, to fund her business, and was now struggling to pay off credit card debt from a loan she had taken to cover even more expenses. Apparently, things weren't going as well as she had hoped. She told me she was just a few months away from breaking even, but was behind on rent and utility bills. Her credit score was in shambles, and she was facing a serious financial crisis. I was shocked. I told her she needed to stop digging herself deeper into this hole. I told her that she was going to end up in a far worse situation if she didn't stop right away and find a way to start paying off her debts. I also told her I couldn't help her out financially. I had worked hard for my money, and I wasn't about to risk it all for something that seemed so unstable. This didn't go over well. She accused me of not caring about her or supporting her dreams. She said I was being a negative influence and that I was abandoning her when she needed me most. I told her that I wasn't abandoning her. I was just being practical and trying to keep her from making a huge mistake. I reminded her that I had tried to advise her to be cautious at the beginning, but she had chosen to ignore my warnings. Our conversation ended with her storming out of my house. Since then, she has barely spoken to me. Whenever we do talk, she accuses me of being selfish and unsupportive. She's also reached out to our parents, asking them for money. Our parents have expressed concern, but are hesitant to give her any money, knowing it could enable her to continue her risky business. Still, they've made it clear they're willing to help her out with some living expenses if necessary. The thing is, I'm feeling torn. On one hand, I want to help my sister. She's family, and I hate seeing her struggle. But on the other hand, I feel like I'm being reasonable in refusing to give her money. She put herself in this situation, and I don't think it's my responsibility to fix it. She's an adult, and I've been telling her to be careful from the start. I've talked to a few of my friends about this, and most of them think I'm doing the right thing. They say it's not my responsibility to bail her out, especially if it's a result of her poor choices. But there's still a part of me that feels guilty. I can't help but wonder if I'm just being cold and heartless. I don't want to lose my sister over money, but I also don't want to enable her to keep making these bad decisions. AITA for refusing to help my sister financially, even though she's in a difficult situation because of her own choices? Should I have done more to intervene, or am I right to stand my ground? I'm really struggling to figure out if I'm being unreasonable here. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel. Your support means a lot and motivates me to create even more amazing content just for you. Make sure to turn on notifications so you'll never miss out on a new video. I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for your support. It truly helps the channel grow. AITA for refusing to lend my car to my sister after she totaled hers? So here's the deal. I'm a 28-year-old guy, and I have a pretty nice car. It's a reliable vehicle. I've had it for a couple of years, and I take good care of it. I work a stable job, and having a car that I can depend on is a huge part of my routine. I use it daily, whether it's for commuting to work or running errands. My sister, Jenny, who's 25, has always had a bit of a chaotic lifestyle. She's kind of the type to act impulsively and not think things through, and it's always been a source of frustration for me. A few months ago, Jenny crashed her car. It wasn't the first time she'd had an accident. She's had a couple of fender benders in the past, but this one was bad. She totaled her car, and it was beyond repair. Thankfully, she wasn't seriously injured, but she did end up in the hospital for a couple of days with some minor injuries. After that, she didn't have a car anymore, and she relied on public transportation, friends, or me to get around. I've always been the responsible one in the family, the one who has their act together. My parents depend on me for a lot of things, and while I don't mind helping out, it's definitely been a bit overwhelming at times. When Jenny was without a car, she started asking me if she could borrow mine to run errands, pick up groceries, or go to work. At first, I didn't mind lending it to her here and there. She's my sister, after all, but the requests started getting more frequent. I eventually told her that I wasn't comfortable with her borrowing my car regularly. I explained that I depended on it, and I didn't feel like it was a good idea to lend it out, especially after her recent accident. Jenny wasn't happy about this, but I thought she'd understand. I didn't want to enable her risky behavior, and honestly, I just didn't trust her behind the wheel after what had happened. Fast forward a couple of weeks, and she calls me in a panic. She says she has an important meeting for work, and she needs a car to get there. She says she's been trying to rent one, but they were all out of stock, and she has no other way to make it. I knew I could have said no again, but she sounded desperate, and I felt bad for her. I hesitated, but eventually agreed, telling her that she could borrow my car just this once, but I needed it back by the evening. I also made it clear that I wanted her to be careful, especially given her history of accidents. She promises me she'll be careful and assures me that everything will be fine. She picks up the car, and a few hours later, she calls me again, sounding even more frantic. She says that she's been in another accident, and this time, the car is damaged. She tells me it's not her fault. She was rear-ended by another driver. I was livid. I asked her if she was okay, and she said she was fine, but the car was definitely not. When she gets home, I can't help but inspect the damage. It's not catastrophic, but there's a dent in the bumper, and the rear tail light is shattered. I'm absolutely furious at this point, but I try to stay calm. I ask her to explain what happened, and she insists that the other driver was speeding and didn't leave enough distance between the cars. She even shows me some pictures she took of the scene, and while I agree that the other driver probably played a part, it still doesn't change the fact that she was involved in yet another accident. At this point, I lose my temper. I yell at her for being careless and irresponsible. I tell her that I warned her, and that this is exactly why I didn't want to lend her my car in the first place. She starts crying, saying that she's sorry and that she didn't mean for it to happen, but I'm too angry to feel sorry for her. I tell her that she's lucky she wasn't hurt, but that doesn't change the fact that she's put me in a difficult position. Now I have to pay for repairs, and I'm not sure if I can trust her to drive my car again. Later, my parents call me. They say I was too hard on Jenny and that I should be more understanding. They claim that accidents happen, and while they understand I'm frustrated, I shouldn't have reacted so harshly. My dad says that I should let it go and just help her out because she's going through a tough time. My mom, on the other hand, says that I should help Jenny find another car or at least take her to work until she gets one. Both of them seem to think I'm being overly dramatic about the whole situation. I'm still fuming, and I tell them I don't want to talk about it right now. I need some space to think things over. After a couple of days of cooling down, I still don't feel like I overreacted. I've been responsible my whole life, and I've never been in a situation where I had to be so concerned about the consequences of lending out my property. I didn't feel like I owed her my car, especially when I know that she doesn't take care of things as seriously as I do. I'm not a mechanic, and I don't want to deal with the hassle of repairs every time she borrows my car. Since then, Jenny hasn't asked to borrow my car again, but my parents have been bringing it up every now and then, reminding me that family should help each other out. I just don't feel like I'm in the wrong here. I love my sister, but I also know that I have to set boundaries for my own peace of mind. I'm wondering if I'm being unreasonable for refusing to lend her my car, or if I'm right to protect myself from what could turn into another stressful situation. So Reddit, AITA for refusing to lend my car to my sister after she totaled hers? AITA for confronting my friend after she made me feel like a bad person for not helping her with a family emergency? I, 30F, have a group of friends that I've known for years. We're all pretty close-knit, and we've supported each other through a lot of things. Life changes, heartbreaks, moving, job changes, you name it. One of my friends, Emily, 29F, has always been someone I thought of as a reliable, supportive friend. That's why this situation has been really bothering me. A couple of weeks ago, Emily's dad, who lives in another state, was in a car accident. From what I know, it wasn't too serious, but he did need surgery and had to be in the hospital for a few days. Emily was obviously upset, and she immediately started making arrangements to go see him. The problem started when Emily began asking all of us to drop everything and go with her, especially me. I want to be clear, I'm not trying to sound callous, but Emily lives about a 5-hour drive away from me. I've got work and commitments that are hard to shuffle around last minute. I also have a chronic health condition that sometimes makes it difficult for me to make long trips. Emily knows about my health, and I thought she would understand if I couldn't drop everything. Emily started by asking me if I could go with her. I told her I couldn't, mainly because of the distance, my work, and my health issues. She was very understanding at first, but the next day, she reached out again and was more persistent. She said, "I really need you there. It would mean a lot to me if you came with me. I don't want to be alone." I felt guilty because I know how much her dad means to her, but I also felt overwhelmed. I explained again that it wasn't a matter of not caring or not wanting to be there for her. I simply couldn't make the trip. I was under the impression that she would understand, but instead, she started sending me messages about how disappointing it was that I couldn't help her during such a difficult time. She mentioned how one of our other friends, Sarah, 31F, had already agreed to come with her, and how she was really counting on me as her best friend to be there too. I was feeling a bit guilt-tripped at this point, but I still couldn't make it happen. The day before Emily left for her dad's, she sent me a message that really rubbed me the wrong way. She said, "I guess you're just not that good of a friend if you can't come. You don't even know how much I'm struggling with this, and I feel like you don't care." At this point, I felt like I was being emotionally manipulated. I tried to be calm and explain that my decision wasn't a reflection of how I feel about her or her family, but she wouldn't listen. She kept pushing the point that real friends would drop everything to be there for her in an emergency. This was the first time I ever felt like Emily was putting a guilt trip on me over something that was completely out of my control. The whole thing left me feeling upset and conflicted. I ended up not replying for a day or two because I didn't know what to say anymore. Then, when she came back from her trip, she reached out to me again, but this time, it was almost like she was pretending everything was fine. We spoke briefly, but I didn't feel like we were really talking about what had happened. I didn't bring it up, but I couldn't stop thinking about how she'd treated me during her time of need. A few days later, a mutual friend of ours, Olivia, 28F, invited us both out for drinks. During the night, the topic came up again. Emily started talking about how hard it was to deal with everything. And at one point she said, "I just wish my name would have come with me." I'm so disappointed that she couldn't help, especially since it wasn't that big of a deal. I had enough at that point. I snapped, and I told her that I was hurt by the way she had treated me. I told her I would have loved to go with her if I could, but I couldn't, and I felt like she was making me feel like a bad person for that. I reminded her of my health issues and that it wasn't a simple decision for me. I also told her I didn't appreciate being guilted into feeling like I was a bad friend when I had valid reasons for not being able to help. Emily was taken aback and didn't say much after that. She apologized briefly, but it felt like she was just doing it to move past the conversation. I didn't feel like she fully understood how hurtful her actions had been. We've been a bit distant since then, and I'm not sure how to approach things with her. A few people in my circle have said that I overreacted and that Emily was just going through a tough time and probably didn't mean to hurt me. They've told me I should let it go and be the bigger person. But part of me feels like I have every right to stand up for myself and not allow someone to make me feel like I'm a bad friend for not being able to drop everything to help. So, AITA for confronting Emily about the way she treated me during her family emergency? Should I have just let it slide and kept quiet? Or did I do the right thing by speaking up? AITA for refusing to let my sister move in with me after her boyfriend cheated on her? So, a bit of background. I, 30F, have a younger sister, Sarah, 25F. We're very close, and we've always had each other's backs. However, recently things have become very complicated, and now I'm wondering if I'm being unreasonable. Sarah has been in a long-term relationship with a guy, Mark, 28M, for about 3 years. At first, he seemed great. I didn't see any red flags, and I actually really liked him. He was respectful, funny, and kind when he was around, and he seemed to treat Sarah well. However, over the last few months, she started to act a bit differently, more stressed, secretive, and anxious. She wouldn't talk much about her relationship, which was unusual for her. Eventually, I started getting the sense that something wasn't quite right, but I didn't want to overstep, so I kept quiet. Then, about 2 weeks ago, Sarah came to me in tears. She explained that she had found out that Mark had cheated on her with a mutual friend of ours, Emma, 26F. To say I was shocked would be an understatement. I had known Emma for years, and I never would have suspected her of doing something like this. Sarah told me she had found texts on Mark's phone, along with some very explicit photos and messages that left no room for doubt. Emma had also apparently been texting Sarah saying how sorry she was, but Sarah didn't want to hear it. Sarah was devastated, obviously. I mean, anyone would be. She spent days crying, going back and forth about whether to break up with him or try to work through it. I encouraged her to take some time to think things through before making any decisions, because I knew she was in a really emotional place. Mark came over a few days after the confrontation and begged for her forgiveness, saying it was a mistake, that he was drunk, and it would never happen again. Sarah told me that she almost considered taking him back, but after everything she had been through, she wasn't sure if she could trust him anymore. I supported whatever decision she made, but I told her I wouldn't tolerate anyone who disrespects her, especially not in that way. Now, here's where things get tricky. After a few days, Sarah reached out to me again. She asked if she could stay with me for a while. Apparently, she was in no mood to be around Mark and needed space to think. I immediately said yes, of course, and let her know she could stay as long as she needed. I live alone, and I have the space, so it wasn't a big deal to me. However, as the days passed, things started to get tense. Sarah would vent about Mark and Emma for hours at a time, which was understandable, but it began to feel like she wasn't really working through her emotions. It became all-consuming, Mark this, Emma that. She would refuse to get out of bed, cancel plans, and sometimes lash out at me if I said anything that even remotely sounded like advice. It felt like she wasn't trying to heal, but rather just wallowing in her anger and sadness. It's not that I didn't empathize with her. I really did. I've been cheated on in the past, so I understood the pain. But I was also trying to be practical. I was doing my best to support her, but I also needed to live my own life. I started to feel emotionally drained. I tried suggesting therapy or even just taking a walk outside to get some fresh air, but she refused. She also started isolating herself from everyone else, even our parents and friends. It felt like she was pulling away from me too, but also using me as her emotional punching bag at the same time. Then about a week ago, she asked if she could move in with me long-term. She said she didn't want to be alone, and her apartment felt too empty without Mark. I told her that while I loved her and would always have her back, I didn't think it was a good idea. I explained that it was important for her to heal on her own terms, and that maybe living with me for an extended period wouldn't be the healthiest choice. I told her she needed to get back to her own life and work on her mental health. I also told her that I needed to maintain some boundaries, both for my own mental health and for hers. Sarah was furious. She accused me of not caring, of being selfish, and of being more loyal to her ex than to her. She said I was abandoning her in her time of need, and that she couldn't believe I was being so cold and distant. Honestly, it stung. I tried to explain that I wasn't rejecting her, but that I thought it would be better for her to get back on her feet on her own rather than rely on me indefinitely. I also told her that she had so much support from other friends and family, and that she needed to take advantage of that instead of focusing solely on me. She didn't take it well. The last few days have been extremely tense. She's still staying at my place, but we barely speak. She hasn't reached out to anyone else for support, and she's barely leaving the apartment. I'm starting to feel guilty, but at the same time, I'm wondering if I'm actually doing the right thing. It feels like no matter what I do, I'm in the wrong. AITA for refusing to let my sister move in long term after a breakup. AITA for refusing to let my parents see my daughter after they insulted my husband. I, 31F, have a 3-year-old daughter, Lily, with my husband, Jake, 33M. We've been married for 5 years, and things have been going great overall. Jake is a kind, loving, and hardworking guy who is very supportive of me and Lily. We have a happy life, and Lily is doing well. She's healthy, smart, and full of energy. I'm proud of the family we've built. I thought everything was going well. The issue started when my parents came to visit a few weeks ago. They live about 4 hours away, so we don't see them as often as I'd like, but they try to visit every couple of months. I've always had a somewhat complicated relationship with them, especially with my mom. She's very critical and can be a bit overbearing, often making comments about how I should live my life or raising issues where none exist. My dad is more laid back, but he tends to agree with whatever my mom says, so it often feels like a united front against me when things go sideways. This particular visit started off well. My parents were thrilled to see Lily, and we spent the first day just catching up, going out to eat, and playing with Lily. Everything was fine, but the next day, things took a turn. Jake was working from home that day, and after lunch, my parents asked if they could talk to me privately. We went into the kitchen, and I thought it was going to be about something like Lily's upcoming birthday or family plans. Instead, my mom started right in with the criticism. "You know, I've been thinking about Jake lately," she said, "and I really don't think he's the right guy for you." I was completely blindsided. I had never heard anything like this before. I asked her what she meant, and she went on about how she thought Jake didn't fit the image of what she envisioned for me when I married. She said he was too quiet and not assertive enough, and that I deserved someone who had more drive and could provide a better future. I was taken aback because Jake works hard. He's been promoted at his job several times, and he's always put our family first. My dad just sat there, nodding along, not saying a word. I felt like I was being attacked, and it didn't help that my mom kept comparing Jake to her idea of a perfect husband, someone who was outgoing, charismatic, and more socially successful. She also mentioned how she thought Jake wasn't really involved with Lily because he wasn't the type to play with kids. I told them that Jake was a fantastic dad and husband, and that I was happy with him. I didn't appreciate them speaking about him like that, especially since they had never said anything negative about him before. My mom just shrugged it off and said, "I'm just worried about you, sweetie." I was getting really upset, so I changed the subject. But instead of letting it go, my mom doubled down, saying that she wasn't sure Lily was getting enough socialization from Jake because he worked from home. She even suggested that it was bad for Lily to not have more role models who were more outgoing and well-rounded. I left the kitchen feeling furious. I didn't want to make a scene in front of Lily, but I was deeply offended by what my parents said. I went to Jake and told him what happened. He was quiet for a while, then just said, "I'm sorry they feel that way, but I'm not going to let them talk down to me or our family. You don't need to defend me." At that point, I wasn't sure what to do. I could tell Jake was hurt by the comments, but he was trying to stay composed for the sake of our family. After a few hours of thinking it over, I made the decision to limit my parents' access to Lily. I told them that I didn't want them to visit again unless they could respect our family dynamics and Jake. When I told them this, my mom flipped out. She started crying and said I was being ridiculous and overprotective. She claimed I was being too sensitive and that she just wanted what was best for me. My dad, as usual, just sat there quietly, letting my mom do all the talking. I stood my ground. I told her I would not tolerate any more insults or disrespect toward Jake, especially in front of our daughter. I told them that Lily's well-being was my priority, and I couldn't let them undermine her father and our family values. I told them if they wanted to see Lily in the future, they needed to apologize to Jake and show him the same respect they would show any other family member. My mom ended up leaving early, and my dad followed her without saying a word. Since then, they've sent me a few messages, but they've been mostly passive-aggressive, things like, "We just want you to be happy, and it's sad that you're letting things come between us." They've also tried to send gifts for Lily, but I haven't let her accept anything from them until they apologize. My siblings have been mixed on the situation. My older brother thinks I overreacted and should have just let it go, saying that my mom only meant well. My younger sister agrees with me, but says I should have handled it more diplomatically and not cut them off entirely. I've been feeling really conflicted since the whole incident. I know I did the right thing by protecting Jake, but I also don't want to alienate my parents. I never thought I'd be in a position where I'd have to choose between my family and my parents, but here I am. I don't know if I'm being too harsh, and I've been second-guessing myself a lot. So, AITA for refusing to let my parents see Lily until they apologize for insulting my husband? Am I being unreasonable in standing up for my family? Or should I have handled the situation differently? AITA for refusing to let my friend borrow money after she's been consistently irresponsible with her finances? So I, 29F, have a friend, Emily, 30F, who I've known since college. We've always been close, but recently I'm starting to question whether I'm being too harsh or if I'm in the right. I feel conflicted because I've known her for so long and care about her, but her behavior is starting to really frustrate me. Here's the situation. Emily has always had a bit of a loose relationship with money. It's not that she doesn't have a job. She works in marketing, has a decent salary, and generally lives in an affordable apartment. However, her financial habits are, to put it mildly, awful. She doesn't budget. She overspends on things she doesn't need, like expensive clothes, gadgets, and random trips. And she's always complaining about not having enough money. But then I'll see her post photos of a new designer purse or a weekend getaway to a fancy resort. It's frustrating because she constantly talks about being broke, but then makes choices that show she's not taking her finances seriously. A few months ago, Emily came to me for the first time, asking if I could lend her $500. She said it was for an emergency. Her car broke down, and she didn't have the money to get it fixed. She promised she'd pay me back within a month. At the time, I wasn't thrilled about it, but I agreed because she's my friend, and I didn't want to leave her stranded. She's always been there for me in the past, so I thought I should help her out, even if I was worried she might not pay me back right away. Fast forward a few weeks, and I'm starting to wonder when I'll get the money back. I texted her, and she apologized for the delay, saying she was just waiting for some things to settle down. Another month went by, and I didn't hear anything about the money. I finally reached out again, and she told me that she was still waiting on a paycheck. I tried to be understanding, but I was starting to get frustrated. I reminded her that it had been months, and I needed the money to cover some of my own bills. She promised it would be sent over soon. That was 3 months ago. I still haven't seen a dime. What's even more frustrating is that since then, I've watched her continue to make poor financial decisions. A few weeks ago, she posted about going on a weekend trip with her boyfriend to an expensive city. I didn't say anything, but it made me really angry. Here she was going on trips and buying things she didn't need while still not paying me back. I'm not even someone who expects money back immediately, but it's been months, and she's avoided talking about it every time I bring it up. The tipping point came last week. Emily texted me again, asking if I could lend her another $400. She said she had a bit of a cash flow issue and needed to cover some unexpected expenses. I was stunned. After everything that's happened, I felt like I had to draw a line. I told her that I couldn't lend her any more money, especially since she still hadn't paid me back from the last loan. I told her I cared about her, but I couldn't keep enabling her financial irresponsibility. She immediately got defensive and started accusing me of being unsupportive and selfish. She said that if I truly cared about her, I'd help her out in her time of need. I tried to explain that I had already given her money once, and I wasn't going to keep bailing her out if she didn't change her habits. I even offered to help her set up a budget and suggested she talk to a financial advisor, but she didn't seem interested in that. She kept focusing on the fact that I wasn't giving her more money and how I wasn't being a good friend. It started to feel like she was more focused on the money than actually working on the real issue, which is her total lack of financial responsibility. This led to a huge argument. She told me that I was too judgmental and that I was acting like I was better than her. She said that I didn't understand what it was like to be struggling and that I didn't have her back the way I should. I told her I was trying to help her in the best way I knew how, but she didn't want help. She just wanted the money. We haven't spoken since that argument, and I feel guilty, but I also feel like I made the right call. I know she's my friend, but I can't keep enabling her when she's not making any effort to change. I understand that people go through tough times, but I've been seeing this same pattern with her for years, and I've had enough. I'm not a financial advisor, and I don't think I should have to sacrifice my own finances to bail her out repeatedly. So, am I the asshole for refusing to lend her money again? I'm feeling torn because she's my friend and I care about her, but I also don't want to be taken advantage of. Should I just be more understanding, or am I in the right for setting boundaries? AITA for not inviting my brother to my daughter's birthday party because of his behavior towards my wife. I, 32M, have a younger brother, Chris, 28M. We've always had a close relationship, but over the last few years, there's been a shift in the dynamic. I got married about 3 years ago to my wife, Sarah, 30F, and we have a 4-year-old daughter, Emily. Everything was great at first, but there have been a lot of issues with Chris and Sarah ever since. To give some background, Chris and Sarah have never gotten along very well. It started when Chris made a joke about Sarah's job during a family dinner. Sarah works in a field that's very demanding and involves long hours, which Chris didn't seem to understand. He started making fun of her for not having a real job and claimed that she was just wasting time in a desk job, while he worked a manual labor job that he felt was more honest work. At first, I brushed it off as just typical brotherly teasing, but Sarah was really hurt by it. She tried to laugh it off, but it was obvious it bothered her. I had a talk with Chris about how his comments weren't cool and how they were disrespectful to Sarah. He apologized, but I noticed the tension didn't really go away. There were small things after that, little digs about her job, her appearance, and even the way she handled certain family events. He'd make passive-aggressive comments or act dismissive toward her, and it started affecting the atmosphere at family gatherings. I felt stuck between my wife and my brother, but I tried to make peace by telling both of them to just get along for my sake, and we could all avoid conflict. Then, things escalated at a family gathering a year ago. We were celebrating my dad's birthday, and Chris, after a few beers, made a comment about how Sarah probably can't even cook a decent meal, and that it was no surprise that I had to rely on takeout. He said this in front of everyone, including Sarah, and it made things incredibly awkward. I could see Sarah's face turn red, and I knew this wasn't just a joke anymore. My dad even tried to deflect the conversation, but Chris wouldn't drop it. I ended up confronting Chris privately after that night. I told him that I didn't appreciate the way he treated Sarah and that he was being a jerk. He apologized, but it didn't feel sincere. He tried to justify his actions by saying that he was just joking around, but I knew it went deeper than that. He didn't like Sarah, and he was making it clear in increasingly hurtful ways. I told him that if he couldn't respect her, then he needed to stay away from our family events, at least until he could learn to treat her like a human being. Chris got defensive and accused me of taking her side over him, but I stood firm. Since then, we've had a couple of tense family gatherings, but things have mostly been civil. Chris will show up, say a few words to me, but avoid Sarah as much as possible. I can see that Sarah is still uncomfortable when he's around, but she's been trying to make the best of it for my sake. Still, I know the situation isn't ideal. Now, here's where the problem really started. My daughter, Emily, is turning 5 in a couple of weeks, and we're planning a small birthday party for her with just close family and a few friends. Sarah and I have been putting together the guest list, and of course my brother Chris is on it. But after everything that's gone down with him and Sarah, I started wondering if it was really worth inviting him. Chris has made no real effort to mend his relationship with Sarah. He's apologized a few times, but his actions have never backed up those words. So, I decided to talk to Sarah about whether she thought it was a good idea to have Chris at the party. She said that she'd be uncomfortable with him there, that she didn't want to put herself in a situation where she felt anxious or like she had to tolerate him for the sake of Emily's day. I understood her feelings, and after giving it some thought, I made the decision not to invite Chris. I felt bad, but I didn't want to create a tense atmosphere at Emily's party. It was supposed to be a day of celebration, not one where everyone was walking on eggshells. So I sent Chris a message explaining that we were keeping the party small and just inviting immediate family and close friends. I said that I hoped he understood, but that it was important for everyone to be comfortable. I didn't go into too much detail, but I made it clear that the decision was about making sure the day went smoothly and that Sarah wouldn't be put in a difficult situation. Chris was absolutely furious. He called me immediately, yelling about how I was excluding him and playing favorites just because of Sarah. He said I was choosing her over my own brother and that I was being disrespectful to him. He accused me of being a bad brother and that I was letting some woman dictate who he could and couldn't see. I tried to explain that this wasn't about taking sides, but he wasn't having any of it. He said that if he wasn't welcome at the party, then he wasn't going to show up to any more of our family events ever again. He said it was my choice, but I'd lost him for good. At this point, I was just exhausted. I told him that I wasn't going to argue about it anymore and that the decision was final. Since then, Chris has been giving me the silent treatment, and my family has started taking sides. My parents called me to ask why Chris wasn't invited, and I explained everything. They were disappointed in my decision and said that I should have just let it go for one day to avoid causing more drama. They said it wasn't worth hurting Chris's feelings over something so small. I told them that it wasn't just about the party, it was about how Chris had treated Sarah over the years. They didn't seem to get it and said I was making a mountain out of a molehill. Now, I'm second-guessing myself. Was I wrong to keep Chris off the guest list? I feel like I was just trying to protect Sarah and create a peaceful environment for Emily's birthday. But now, I feel like I might have pushed my brother away for good. Everyone's telling me that family should come first, but I feel like I've been doing everything I can to balance both sides, and it hasn't been working. So Reddit, AITA for not inviting my brother to my daughter's birthday party because of his behavior towards my wife. AITA for not inviting my sister to my graduation because of the way she treated me in the past. 24F, recently graduated from university, and while it was an exciting achievement for me, the lead up to the graduation day was a bit more complicated than I expected. One of the biggest things that made it stressful was deciding whether or not to invite my older sister, Amanda, 30F, to the ceremony. To give some context, my sister and I have had a very strained relationship for most of my life. Growing up, she was always the golden child in the family, and I was the quiet, less interesting younger sibling. She was incredibly successful academically and socially, while I always felt like I was in her shadow. Our parents, especially our mom, constantly compared me to her, which made me resent her a lot growing up. While she got praise for every little thing she did, I was often told I wasn't doing enough or living up to the family standard. The tension between my sister and I only grew when I was a teenager. Amanda moved out for college when I was still in high school, so I didn't have to deal with her directly as much. However, she would still come home for holidays, and every time, it felt like I was somehow made to feel inferior. She would make sarcastic comments about my grades or my friends, or even about my hobbies, just dismissing everything I was doing like it was a waste of time. I'll admit, I wasn't the most outgoing person, and I didn't always know how to stand up for myself, but her comments hurt every single time. I can't pinpoint exactly when our relationship started to deteriorate, but I remember one specific incident during my senior year of high school that really stuck with me. I was getting accepted into a few colleges, and I was really excited. Amanda, who had already been through the college process and was in grad school at that point, casually told me, "Good luck, but you're probably not going to get into the ones you really want." I'm not trying to be mean, just realistic. I was heartbroken. She was always dismissive, but this moment felt like a final blow. After that, I distanced myself from her as much as I could. I focused on my own life, trying to improve my grades, make new friends, and get into the college of my choice. I didn't invite her to my high school graduation because I didn't feel like I could share such an important moment with someone who made me feel so small. To be honest, I think that decision was a turning point for both of us. After that, we never really had a sisterly relationship anymore. We'd see each other during holidays or family events, but we didn't really speak much outside of those times. Fast forward to a few months ago, and I'm about to graduate from university. I had put in a lot of work to get to this point, especially after the challenges I faced in high school and the constant comparison to Amanda. I was proud of myself. I knew that my family would be there, and I was looking forward to celebrating with the people who had supported me. However, when the graduation invitations came around, I started debating whether or not to invite Amanda. She had made an appearance at a few family gatherings recently, but we hadn't really repaired our relationship. In fact, I was still hurt by the things she had said to me over the years, especially her condescending attitude. I brought up the dilemma to my mom. I asked her if she thought I should invite Amanda, and she gave me a look that said it all. She said, "Amanda is your sister. It's your graduation. She should be there." I knew what she meant. Family is family, and I should put the past behind me for the sake of my special day. But deep down, I still felt like Amanda didn't deserve to be part of this moment in my life. I had worked so hard to get here, and I didn't want someone who had treated me poorly for years to suddenly show up like nothing had happened. I ended up deciding not to invite Amanda to my graduation. I wrote the invitation list carefully, ensuring that the people who had been truly supportive of me throughout my university journey were there. I invited my close friends, my extended family, and of course my parents. I felt like I had earned this day, and I didn't want someone who had never been truly there for me to steal the spotlight. The day of the graduation came, and everything went smoothly. I was thrilled, and the ceremony was everything I had hoped for. But when I got home and was talking to my parents about the event, my mom casually mentioned that Amanda had called her to ask why she wasn't invited to the graduation. Apparently, Amanda was upset and hurt that I had left her off the guest list. She said it was ridiculous that I could invite everyone except for her, and that I was holding on to petty grudges instead of being a mature adult. My mom said she had tried to explain that I had made the decision not to invite her, but Amanda wasn't having it. When I heard this, I felt a mixture of guilt and anger. Guilt because I didn't want to hurt anyone, especially my family, but anger because I felt like Amanda was once again trying to manipulate the situation. She had never apologized for the things she'd said or done to me. She had never tried to repair our relationship. So, why should I have to invite her to this milestone in my life? A few days later, Amanda reached out to me directly, asking why I hadn't invited her to the graduation. She said she understood that we had our issues, but that it was a big deal and I should have grown up and invited her. She even went as far as to say that I was acting childish and punishing her for things that happened years ago. This conversation pushed me to my breaking point, and I finally told her that her behavior over the years had hurt me, and I couldn't just pretend everything was fine. I told her that it wasn't just about one event, it was about years of being treated poorly. She was silent for a while, and then said that I was making it sound like she was a terrible person, and that she didn't deserve this from me. I ended the conversation there. It felt like she was more upset about not being invited than actually understanding the reasons behind my decision. Now, my parents are upset with me, and they've been pressuring me to make amends with Amanda. My mom insists that I should have invited her for the sake of family unity. My dad is a bit more neutral, but still thinks I'm being too harsh on Amanda. Some of my friends think I made the right choice, and some think I should have been the bigger person. I'm torn. Did I make the right decision by not inviting her? Or was I too harsh? AITA for not inviting my sister to my graduation because of the way she treated me in the past? Hey friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what could be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. AITA for going no contact with my best friend after she told me I was too selfish to have kids. I, 30F, have been best friends with Sarah, 30F, for over 15 years. We've always been close, and I've been there for her through every major life event. breakups, job changes, family issues, you name it. She's also been there for me, and we've always been each other's support system. In fact, Sarah has been my maid of honor, and I've supported her through some of the toughest times in her life. For context, I'm married to my husband, Mark, 32M, and we've been together for 5 years. We're both stable in our careers and have a pretty comfortable life. For a while now, Mark and I have been talking about having kids, and I've been excited about starting a family. We've been trying for a few months, and while it hasn't happened yet, we're hopeful and feel ready. Sarah, on the other hand, has made it very clear for the past few years that she doesn't want kids. She's always said that she loves being an aunt and enjoys spending time with my niece and nephew, but she just doesn't feel the need to have her own. She's also very focused on her career and personal freedom, and I've always respected her decision. We've never really had serious talks about children, and I never pushed her on the subject. I've always believed that everyone should make their own choices about having kids, and we've gotten along fine despite our differences. A few weeks ago, I had a conversation with Sarah that completely changed everything between us. We were having lunch, and the topic of children came up. I was telling her how I was excited about the possibility of becoming a mom, and how Mark and I were trying to get pregnant. I could tell she wasn't exactly thrilled, but I brushed it off. She's always been a little distant when it comes to this topic, and I assumed it was just her usual stance. But then, Sarah said something that caught me completely off guard. She told me that she didn't think I was cut out to be a mom. I laughed, thinking she was joking, but she didn't laugh back. Instead, she said, "I just don't think you have what it takes to be a good mom. You're too selfish." I was floored. I have always prided myself on being a caring person, and I've always been the one people turn to when they need help. I have a good job, a stable home, and a loving husband. I felt like I was more than ready for the responsibility of having children, and I couldn't understand why Sarah would say something so hurtful. I asked her why she thought I was selfish, and she responded, "You're always talking about how much you want kids, but I don't think you're really considering what that means. You like your life the way it is right now. You get to travel, have nice things, and do whatever you want. Once you have kids, everything changes. You'll have to give up everything that makes you happy for them, and I don't think you're prepared for that. I just don't think you're selfless enough to handle it." I was stunned. I felt like I was being judged for something I hadn't even done yet. I tried to explain that I understood the sacrifices that come with parenthood, but that didn't change the fact that I was excited and ready for the responsibility. I told her that I had always wanted to be a mom, and I had never felt more prepared for that role. But she wasn't hearing it. She continued to push, telling me that I didn't have the maternal instinct, and that she couldn't see me giving up my career and personal goals for a child. She even went so far as to say, "I think you're just doing it because you think you're supposed to. You've always wanted to be the perfect little family, but I don't think you'll be able to handle it." At that point, I was so hurt and confused that I didn't know what to say. I tried to explain that my decision to have kids wasn't about living up to some ideal, but about wanting to build a family with my husband. But Sarah wasn't listening. She kept insisting that I wasn't ready and that I didn't understand what I was getting myself into. I ended the conversation as gracefully as I could, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. I felt deeply betrayed by my best friend. She was someone I'd always looked up to, someone who had always been there for me, and now she was telling me I wasn't capable of something that was incredibly important to me. It felt like a personal attack, and I couldn't believe that she would say something like that to me. Over the next few days, I struggled with how to process the conversation. I felt like I needed some space from Sarah to think about everything she had said. I didn't want to fight with her, but I also couldn't ignore how hurt I was by her words. I decided to take a step back and not reach out to her. A week went by, and I didn't hear from Sarah. I wasn't surprised, given that I had distanced myself, but I was also frustrated. I had always been the one to reach out, to keep the friendship going, and now it felt like she was completely ignoring me. After some thought, I decided that I needed to have an honest conversation with her about how I was feeling. I texted her asking if we could meet up to talk, and she agreed. When we met, I was direct. I told her that I was deeply hurt by what she had said, and that I felt like she didn't respect my decision to become a mom. I explained that I had always respected her choice not to have children, and I had never judged her for it. But I didn't understand why she had judged me. She listened quietly, but when I was finished, she said something that made me even more upset. She told me that she didn't think I was being honest with myself about why I wanted kids. She said, "Maybe you should think about why you want them so badly. It's not just about you, you know? It's a huge responsibility, and I don't think you're capable of handling it." That was the breaking point for me. I told her that I couldn't continue a friendship where I was constantly being told I wasn't good enough, and I decided to go no contact. She was shocked and tried to apologize, but I couldn't get past the way she had made me feel. It's been 3 weeks now, and I still feel conflicted. Part of me misses Sarah and the friendship we had, but another part of me feels like I need to protect myself from people who are willing to tear me down, even if they think they're doing it out of concern. So, AITA for going no contact with my best friend after she told me I was too selfish to have kids? Should I have handled this situation differently? Or was I right to cut her out of my life? AITA for telling my sister that she is being selfish for expecting me to cancel my trip because of her miscarriage? I, 30F, have an older sister, Anna, 34F. We've always had a close relationship, but things have been a bit rocky lately, and I'm honestly not sure if I'm being unreasonable here or if she's being unfair. So I'm turning to Reddit for some advice. To give you some background, I've been planning a trip to Europe for the past year. It's something I've been saving for and dreaming about for a long time. It's a solo trip, and I've been working overtime and cutting back on all non-essential expenses to make this happen. It's my first real vacation in years, and I've been so excited about it. I've already booked flights, accommodations, and activities. It's just a huge deal for me, and I've been counting down the days. Here's where things get complicated. About a month ago, Anna found out she was pregnant. It was a big deal for our family as she had struggled with infertility for a while, and we were all over the moon for her. She had a rough start to her pregnancy, but things seemed to be going well. She had her first trimester screening and was excited to tell me about all the baby-related things she had planned. However, last week, Anna called me crying. She told me she had miscarried. She was devastated, understandably. It's an incredibly painful thing to go through, and my heart broke for her. I immediately offered my support, telling her I'd be there for her, whether she needed space or if she wanted company. I tried to comfort her the best I could, but I could tell she was in a lot of pain, emotionally and physically. The issue started when she called me the day after her miscarriage and told me that she was really upset about my upcoming trip. She said that it was really hard for her to deal with everything, and she needed me to be there for her. I reassured her that I would be there for her in any way I could while still going on my trip. I had already made the necessary arrangements and couldn't change the dates now. That's when things started to spiral. She told me that it would be selfish of me to go on my trip while she was grieving. She said she needed her family close, especially me, since I'm her only sister. She mentioned that I could always travel later, but this was a time when she really needed emotional support. I understand she's going through a tough time, but I also felt like she was being unreasonable. I tried explaining to her that this trip was something I had been planning for over a year, and canceling it would be incredibly disappointing for me. I also pointed out that I had already made all the non-refundable bookings, and this trip was something I had been working toward for so long. I had saved up all my vacation days from work, and it wasn't just a regular getaway. It was an experience I had been dreaming of for a long time. I told her that I would still be available to support her in other ways, like checking in regularly, being there for her once I returned, and making sure she had the emotional and practical help she needed. But she wasn't hearing any of it. Anna became more upset, accusing me of being unsympathetic and cold. She said that if I truly cared about her, I would cancel my trip and stay with her through this hard time. She also said I was prioritizing my own happiness over her pain, and that it felt like I didn't care about her grief. I tried to stay calm, but it was hard not to feel like she was putting me in an impossible position. I wasn't abandoning her. I just didn't think I should have to cancel something I've worked so hard for just because she's having a tough time. The argument got even worse when I brought up the fact that she had other people around her, including our parents, her husband, and some close friends who could support her in person. I mentioned that she wasn't alone and that I would still be there for her through texts and calls. But she told me that it wasn't the same and that I was being completely insensitive to her situation. She said that it felt like I was choosing a vacation over her, and that was something she couldn't understand. I tried to empathize with her, but it felt like nothing I said made a difference. It felt like she was trying to guilt me into canceling my trip. She kept saying that she didn't want to force me to stay, but it was clear she was expecting me to. The pressure was really starting to get to me. I've always tried to be supportive of my family, and I would never want to hurt Anna, but I also don't think I should have to sacrifice something that I've been looking forward to for so long just because she's going through a tough time. I've been feeling guilty ever since the conversation, but I also think that she's being unfair in expecting me to drop everything. I want to support her, but I also want to go on this trip, and I don't think it's selfish to prioritize something that's important to me too. So, AITA for not canceling my trip to Europe to stay with my sister after her miscarriage. I feel like I'm walking a fine line between supporting her and standing up for my own needs, and I'm honestly not sure if I'm being unreasonable. Will I be a bad sister if I go on my trip, or should I just suck it up and cancel to be there for her? AITA for not letting my best friend bring her boyfriend to my house after the way he treated me. I, 29F, have a best friend, Maya, 30F, who I've known since college. We've been through a lot together, and we've always been there for each other. Over the years, I've seen her go through a few relationships, and I've always tried to be supportive, even when I didn't particularly like her boyfriends. Maya has always had a type, and let's just say it's not the kind of guy I usually get along with. But I've always put that aside because I care about her and value our friendship. Maya's current boyfriend, Jake, 32M, is the latest in a long line of guys who I don't exactly get along with. From the start, I could tell there was something off about him. He seemed nice enough on the surface, but the more I got to know him, the more red flags I saw. He's very self-centered and dismissive of people who don't share his views or interests. He's also incredibly arrogant and thinks he's better than everyone else, especially me. The thing that bothered me the most, though, was how he treated Maya. He was controlling and often belittled her in front of me and other friends, making her seem small or stupid in a way that was hard to ignore. At first, I thought maybe I was just being too judgmental. I tried to be polite when he was around, even though it felt like he had no interest in building any sort of rapport with me. He never made any effort to get to know me, and honestly, I felt like he just tolerated me because I was Maya's friend. Maya, however, was totally blind to his behavior. She always defended him, saying that he was just being honest or doesn't know how to communicate well. I tried to voice my concerns a few times, but Maya would brush me off, telling me that I just didn't understand him or that I was overthinking things. Recently, Maya invited me to dinner at her place. She and Jake had just moved in together, and I was excited to see their new place, especially since we hadn't spent much time together recently. I knew Jake would be there, and to be honest, I wasn't thrilled about it, but I figure I could suck it up for Maya's sake. The evening started off okay. Maya and I were catching up, talking about old times, and I was genuinely enjoying myself. But as the night went on, things started to take a turn. Jake kept making little comments under his breath, which I initially thought were harmless. However, after a while, it became clear that he was mocking me. He would make sarcastic remarks about things I said or question my choices in a condescending way. For example, when I mentioned a recent trip I took, Jake snorted and said, "Well, I don't know why anyone would spend money on something so pointless. But hey, if you like wasting your time, that's your choice." At first, I tried to brush it off, thinking he was just being rude and I could deal with it for the sake of keeping the peace. But then, he took it even further. When I talked about a new project I was working on at work, he interrupted me to say, "Honestly, I can't imagine anyone wanting to hire someone like you for something that important." That was the breaking point. I was stunned, and I could feel my face burning with embarrassment. I looked at Maya, hoping she would say something, but she just sat there quietly, not even making eye contact with me. I don't know what made me snap, but I stood up from the table and told Jake that I didn't appreciate the way he was speaking to me. I told him that I was Maya's friend, and if he couldn't be respectful, then maybe he shouldn't be around. Maya immediately got defensive and told me to calm down and that I was overreacting. She tried to make excuses for Jake, saying that he was just being honest and didn't mean anything by it. I felt my frustration building, but I knew there was no point in arguing with Maya. So I grabbed my things, said goodbye, and left. Later that night, I got a text from Maya saying that she was upset with me for leaving the dinner early. She said I had made the situation awkward and that I was being too harsh on Jake. She told me that I needed to understand that relationships are complicated and I should be more supportive of her and Jake. She also said that Jake was a good person and that I was just jealous because he was in her life now. I didn't respond right away because I was honestly too upset to engage. But after a couple of days, I texted Maya back, telling her that I felt disrespected by Jake and that I couldn't just ignore how he treated me. I told her that I loved her, but I didn't want to keep putting myself in a situation where I felt belittled and uncomfortable for the sake of her relationship. I told her that if she was going to continue dating him, I didn't think I could be around him anymore. I asked her to understand that it wasn't about her, it was about how he made me feel, and I couldn't be around someone who treated me like that. Maya was furious. She said that I was being unfair and that I was trying to control who she could date. She accused me of acting like a child and told me that I should grow up and accept that not everyone is going to be your friend. She also said that I was being selfish and that I wasn't considering how much Jake meant to her. She said that if I couldn't accept her boyfriend, then maybe we couldn't be as close as we used to be. I felt heartbroken. Maya and I have been friends for so long, and it hurt to think that our friendship could be coming to an end because of her relationship. I still love her, but I can't keep pretending that everything is okay when it's not. I've always been there for her, and I've never asked her to choose between me and a boyfriend before. But this situation is different. I feel like I've been put in a position where I'm being asked to tolerate someone who makes me feel small and disrespected for the sake of keeping the peace. Now, I'm wondering if I was wrong for putting my foot down and saying that I couldn't keep seeing Jake. Am I being too harsh for not tolerating his behavior? Should I just accept him for the sake of my friendship with Maya, even if it means sacrificing my own comfort? So Reddit, AITA for not letting my best friend bring her boyfriend to my house after the way he treated me? AITA for telling my best friend that she shouldn't have come to my birthday party after she showed up uninvited? I, 26F, recently had my birthday, and I thought it would be a good chance to reconnect with some of my friends from college and a few people from work. I'm not someone who likes to make a huge deal out of birthdays, but this year I felt like I wanted to celebrate a little more and have some fun. It wasn't going to be anything extravagant, just a casual get-together at a bar with a few drinks and some light conversation. One of my best friends, Sophie, 27F, and I have known each other since we were freshmen in college. We've been through a lot together over the years, and I always considered her someone I could count on. However, our friendship has been a bit strained over the last year. We've had some disagreements, mostly about how we approach certain life situations, and to be honest, it feels like we've been growing apart. I've noticed that when I try to talk to Sophie, she can be really dismissive of my feelings, and lately, she's been more focused on herself than on our friendship. One of the biggest issues I've had with Sophie is her tendency to make everything about her. Over the past several months, I made a conscious effort to be there for her. She had some personal struggles, and I tried my best to support her. But whenever I had something important to share or needed her to listen, she would always shift the focus back to her problems. It felt like my issues didn't matter, and I started to feel drained by it. Now, leading up to my birthday, I had been thinking a lot about Sophie. I was torn between inviting her and leaving her off the guest list. We'd had a few blowout arguments over the past few months, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to deal with her behavior at my birthday party. In the end, I decided not to invite her. I wanted to have a peaceful celebration with the people who genuinely made me feel good and who I felt supported by. I figured that if Sophie truly cared, she would understand why I hadn't invited her, especially considering how we'd been distant. On the day of the party, everything was going smoothly. My close friends were there, and the atmosphere was lighthearted. Everyone was having fun, and I was enjoying myself. Then, about an hour into the party, Sophie showed up. She was standing by the entrance, looking a bit awkward, and when she saw me, she waved enthusiastically and walked straight toward me. I was shocked and immediately felt a mix of irritation and confusion. "Hey, I hope you don't mind me coming," Sophie said with a big smile. "I was just in the area, and I thought it would be fun to join you." I was caught off guard. She hadn't even texted me to check if it was okay for her to come. I didn't know how to respond, but I tried to keep my cool and smile back. Sophie, you weren't invited, I said quietly, trying to be polite but firm. Her face faltered for a second, but then she quickly recovered. Oh, come on. It's your birthday. I'm sure you don't mind, right? She said, brushing it off like it wasn't a big deal. I was already feeling a little uncomfortable with the situation. It wasn't just the fact that she showed up uninvited, but the way she was acting like it was no big deal made me feel like my boundaries didn't matter. I tried to stay calm, but the reality was I wasn't in the mood to deal with her behavior. Sophie, I really think it's best if you leave, I said. I wasn't expecting you here, and I've been trying to keep this night low-key with the people I invited. You can't just show up unannounced. She looked at me, eyes wide, clearly taken aback. For a moment, there was silence between us. I could feel everyone else around us starting to notice the tension. Sophie let out a soft laugh, though it didn't sound sincere. Are you serious right now? It's just a party. You're acting like I've done something terrible. I didn't want to cause a scene, but I felt my frustration rising. I'm serious, I replied. It's really not okay that you showed up uninvited, and honestly, I don't have the energy to deal with it tonight. At this point, Sophie's face hardened. She took a deep breath, and in a tone that was more hurt than angry, she said, I can't believe you're doing this. I thought we were friends, and now you're kicking me out of your birthday party. I could feel my stomach twist. It wasn't that I didn't care about her, but she had been so dismissive of me for the past year that I felt like this was the only way to set a clear boundary. We are friends, but this isn't about that, I said. It's about respect. You can't just show up without even checking in with me. I've been trying to have some space from you for a reason. The room was quiet for a moment, and it felt like everyone was holding their breath. Sophie stared at me, her expression a mix of disbelief and hurt. She didn't say anything else, but turned on her heel and walked out. I felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders, but also a pang of guilt. Was I being too harsh? Was I overreacting? The rest of the night was awkward. My friends tried to reassure me, saying that I'd done the right thing by setting boundaries, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd ruined the night. The next day, Sophie texted me, asking what the hell happened and why I was treating her like this. She said I was being ridiculous and childish for kicking her out, and that if our friendship meant anything, I would have let her stay. I didn't know how to respond. On one hand, I felt like I had every right to ask her to leave after everything that had happened. On the other hand, I couldn't help but feel like maybe I could have handled it better. I hadn't wanted to hurt her, but I was also tired of constantly being the one to put up with her behavior. So, AITA for telling Sophie she shouldn't have come to my birthday party after showing up uninvited, or should I have let her stay and just dealt with it? AITA for not letting my sister-in-law stay with me after she borrowed money from me and hasn't paid me back? I, 29F, have been married to my husband, Daniel, 31M, for 3 years. We have a comfortable life, a cozy 2-bedroom apartment, and we're both relatively happy with where we are right now. We've both been working hard in our careers, and while we're not rich, we manage just fine. Daniel has a younger sister, Rachel, 26F, who I've known since we started dating. Rachel and I have always had a somewhat strained relationship, but I've tried to be supportive when I can. Rachel has always been a bit of a free spirit. She's the type of person who jumps from job to job, rarely stays in one place for long, and tends to make impulsive decisions that often lead to financial trouble. She's also known to be pretty irresponsible with money, which has caused issues in the past. I've tried to be understanding, but it's hard to watch someone make the same mistakes over and over again. About 6 months ago, Rachel found herself in a tight spot. She had lost her job and, to make matters worse, had racked up some serious credit card debt trying to keep up with her living expenses. She came to Daniel and me, asking if she could borrow $3,000 to help pay off some bills and get back on her feet. I was hesitant, but agreed to lend her the money, mainly because Daniel insisted. He said that family helps family, and since she was his sister, he didn't want to let her fall through the cracks. At the time, I had no idea that this would turn into such a mess. I agreed to lend her the money, but I made it clear that I expected it to be paid back within a few months. Rachel promised she would pay us back as soon as she found another job and got back on her feet. I even gave her a written agreement for repayment to avoid any misunderstandings, which Daniel thought was a bit extreme, but I felt it was necessary given her past history with money. Months went by, and Rachel didn't seem to be doing much better. She found a part-time job, but it didn't pay well, and she was still living paycheck to paycheck. Every time we brought up the money, she would come up with some excuse about why she couldn't pay us back yet. First, it was because her car broke down. Then, it was because her rent went up. Then, it was because she had to buy some new clothes for interviews. The excuses kept piling up, and each time, I felt more frustrated and less sympathetic. A few weeks ago, Rachel called me in a panic. She said she was in between apartments because her lease was up and she couldn't find a new place to live. She asked if she could stay with us for a few weeks while she sorted things out. I wasn't thrilled about it, but I agreed. Our apartment is small, and it would be cramped with 3 people, but I figured it would only be temporary, so it wouldn't be too much of an inconvenience. Besides, Daniel really wanted to help her, and he convinced me that it would only be for a short time. The first few days went okay, but it didn't take long for things to go south. Rachel was constantly complaining about everything: the noise, the lack of space, even the food in the fridge. She would leave her things everywhere, never cleaned up after herself, and took over the bathroom for hours at a time. She also brought friends over without asking, which annoyed me because we'd told her up front that we weren't comfortable with having a lot of people in the apartment. The tipping point came when I tried to talk to her about the money she still owed us. I reminded her that it had been 6 months, and we needed to start making progress on getting the loan paid back. I suggested that maybe she could pay us $200 a month until the balance was cleared. At first, she got defensive and told me that she was still trying to get back on her feet. I was patient and told her that we understood it wasn't easy, but we needed her to be more responsible. She responded by saying, "It's not like you need the money anyway," which was incredibly frustrating. It felt like she was belittling the situation, as if we had all the time in the world. I then told her that I wasn't comfortable with her staying in our apartment any longer if she wasn't going to be more responsible about repaying the loan. I explained that we needed the space back and that it was becoming too stressful for me to manage. She got upset, accusing me of being cold and unsupportive. She said that I was being unreasonable, and that since I had money, which isn't exactly true, we're not rich, but we're stable, I shouldn't be making her feel bad about not paying us back. I explained that it wasn't about whether or not we had money, but about her making an effort to take responsibility for the loan. I reminded her of the agreement and how much time had passed. She said she was doing her best and that it was unfair for me to expect her to repay us when she was struggling so much. But that didn't sit right with me. We had been patient for months, and she hadn't made any meaningful effort to pay us back. In the end, I told her that she needed to find a new place to stay. I wasn't going to keep her here indefinitely, especially if she was going to keep making excuses. She was furious and stormed out, saying I was being heartless. Daniel wasn't thrilled with my decision, but he agreed with me that it had gone on long enough. Now Rachel isn't speaking to me at all. She hasn't called or texted, and when Daniel tried to reach out to her, she ignored him too. She's been staying with some friends, but she's still upset with me for kicking her out and for being so demanding about the money. She's told several other family members that I'm being unreasonable and that I should have just helped her out without expecting repayment, especially since we're doing so well financially. I've been feeling guilty, but also frustrated. It's hard to help someone who never takes responsibility for their actions. I don't want to lose my sister-in-law, but I also don't want to keep enabling her bad behavior. Daniel says that he understands where I'm coming from, but he also wants to keep the peace with his sister. So, AITA for not letting my sister-in-law stay with me after she borrowed money and hasn't paid it back? Should I have just let her stay longer and kept quiet about the loan? Or was I right to ask her to leave? AITA for refusing to let my friend borrow my car after she crashed hers? I, 27F, have a friend, Jess, 28F, who I've known since college. We've always been close, and while we have some differences, we've always been there for each other through thick and thin. However, recently, I'm starting to question whether I'm being unreasonable or if she's the one overstepping. Here's the situation. Jess has never been great with cars. She's been in several accidents over the years, and while none of them have been major, they've always left her with some kind of damage to her vehicles. I've always been a little worried about her driving, but I've never said anything. After her last accident a few months ago, she got her car fixed and seemed to be more careful, or at least I thought she was. A few weeks ago, I got a call from Jess. She had crashed her car again, this time in a parking lot. The damage wasn't extreme, but it was enough to leave her without a car for at least a week while it was being repaired. She explained that her car insurance was maxed out, and she didn't have the money to pay for the repairs right away. She asked if I would consider lending her my car until hers was fixed, saying she couldn't afford to pay for a rental and that she really needed to get to work. She told me she'd take good care of it and that it would only be for a week or two. I was taken aback. I understand that accidents happen, but this wasn't the first time she had caused damage to her car, and I honestly wasn't comfortable with the idea of her driving mine. I have a relatively new car, one I've worked hard to buy, and it's in great condition. I use it for work and personal things, and I rely on it every day. I told Jess I wasn't sure about lending her my car, but I would help her figure out some other solutions, like maybe helping her find an affordable rental or offering a ride when I could. She wasn't happy with that response. She said I was being selfish and that I was her best friend. She argued that it was only a temporary solution, and she was in a tough spot. She told me that if I truly cared about her, I would help her out, especially since I could afford to do so. She said she understood my hesitation, but that she needed me to trust her. She promised she would be careful and bring the car back without a scratch. After all, it was just a short period of time, right? I felt incredibly torn. On the one hand, I do care about her, and I want to help her out when she's in a difficult situation. On the other hand, I've seen how careless she can be with cars, and the idea of her driving my vehicle made me uncomfortable. I also worried that if something did happen, I would be stuck with the consequences. I decided to explain my concerns to her in more detail. I told her that I wasn't comfortable lending her my car because of her history with accidents, and I didn't want to risk something happening to it. I also told her that I couldn't afford to deal with the financial or logistical issues that could arise from lending my car to her. I offered to help her figure out another way to get around, whether it was by helping her find a ride or researching rental options. She took it really badly. She accused me of being selfish, of not supporting her when she really needed it. She said that she couldn't believe I was turning my back on her in her time of need, especially when I had the means to help. She said that I was being too protective of my car, that if the situation were reversed, I would expect her to lend me her car without hesitation. She told me that this was really hurtful, and it made her question our friendship. The conversation ended on a very sour note. She didn't speak to me for a couple of days, and when she finally did, she was cold and distant. I tried to reach out to her, but it felt like I was walking on eggshells. I've been feeling terrible ever since, but I also feel like I made the right call. I love Jess, but I don't think I'm wrong for not wanting to lend her my car, especially when I know she's not the best driver and has a history of accidents. Now I'm second-guessing myself. I want to be a good friend, but I also want to protect my car and my own peace of mind. I'm struggling with whether I should have just trusted her and lent her my car, or if I was right to hold firm on my decision. I've helped her out in other ways before, so I don't think I'm being an entirely bad friend, but this situation has made me feel guilty. AITA for refusing to let my friend borrow my car after she crashed hers. I feel like I'm stuck between wanting to support her and wanting to protect my own property. Should I have just trusted her, or was my decision justified? AITA for not allowing my sister to move in with me after she kicked her boyfriend out. So a little backstory. I, 30F, have a younger sister, Lauren, 26F, who has always been a bit of a free spirit. Growing up, we didn't always get along, but over the years, we've become closer. I love her, but she can be incredibly impulsive and doesn't always think things through. I've always been the responsible one in the family. I've had my own apartment since I was 22, and I've worked hard to maintain my life and career. I've always kept my personal life in check, and I like my space and routine. Recently, Lauren went through a pretty messy breakup with her boyfriend, Mike, 28M. They had been living together for about 2 years, but things were clearly not going well. There were constant arguments, They had very different lifestyles, and it seemed like they were both staying in the relationship more out of convenience than actual love. Lauren had called me a few times during their relationship, venting about their issues, but she never seemed to want to make a decision to leave. Mike was very controlling and didn't always treat her with the respect she deserved, but Lauren is someone who tends to minimize her problems and tries to avoid confrontation. So it wasn't shocking when she stayed in the relationship despite how unhappy she seemed. A couple of weeks ago, she finally decided she had enough. Mike had done something particularly shady, and she couldn't ignore it anymore. They had a huge blowout fight, and Lauren kicked him out of their shared apartment. She was devastated and emotionally drained from everything that had happened, but I thought maybe this was the push she needed to break free from someone who wasn't good for her. She reached out to me the day after the breakup, asking if she could stay with me for a little while. I was initially hesitant, but I didn't want to leave her homeless or struggling. I've always been there for her, and I wanted to support her through this difficult time. I also knew she didn't have any other options, since she'd been living with Mike and hadn't saved much money. I agreed to let her move in for a bit, with the understanding that it would only be temporary, and she would need to start looking for a new place as soon as possible. At first, everything seemed fine. Lauren seemed to appreciate the space and the chance to get away from the chaos of her breakup. I let her have a separate room in my two-bedroom apartment, and she spent her days either out looking for a new apartment or trying to process everything that had happened. But it quickly became clear that this situation was not going to be as easy as I had hoped. For one, Lauren's emotional state was far worse than I had anticipated. She was constantly on the phone with friends or family venting about Mike, and it seemed like all she wanted to do was talk about the breakup. I get it. She was hurt and confused, but it started to feel like every conversation with her was the same. She would start crying about how terrible Mike was and how she couldn't believe she had wasted so much time with him, and I felt like I was constantly offering the same advice, that she needed to focus on moving forward and not dwell on the past. But she didn't want to hear it. She wasn't ready to let go, and she kept asking me for emotional support, which was draining. I also started noticing that she wasn't really doing much to get her life back on track. She wasn't looking for jobs or apartments as much as she claimed. She would go out for interviews or viewings, but when she came back home, it seemed like she wasn't really making much progress. She would say things like, "I don't think I'm ready to make such a big change," or "the apartments I've seen are too expensive." It was clear that she was procrastinating, and it frustrated me. I felt like I was being pulled into her drama, and my own routine was starting to get disrupted. A few weeks into her stay, I started to feel overwhelmed. I've always valued my personal space, and having someone living in my apartment, especially someone who was emotionally volatile, was starting to wear on me. Lauren had no sense of boundaries. She would leave her things all over the apartment, borrow my clothes without asking, and even eat the food I'd specifically bought for myself. I tried to set boundaries and ask her to respect my space, but she seemed to either ignore them or forget about them. Whenever I would ask her to be more considerate, she would burst into tears and apologize, but the behavior wouldn't change. The real issue came when I asked her to contribute to the household in some way. I had been covering all the rent and expenses by myself, and while I wasn't expecting her to pay half, I thought it was reasonable to ask if she could at least help with groceries or utilities. I mentioned this casually one evening, and her response was immediate and defensive. She said that she wasn't in a place to contribute because she was still recovering from the breakup and didn't have a steady income at the moment. I understood that, but I also thought that it was fair to ask for some basic help, even if it was just small things. She told me I was being unreasonable and that I shouldn't be making her feel guilty for needing a place to stay. I tried to explain that I wasn't upset about her needing support, but that I couldn't afford to carry everything on my own. She didn't take it well, and we ended up having a huge argument. A few days after the argument, I sat down and really thought about the situation. I realized that I was doing too much for Lauren, and I was starting to lose my patience. She wasn't actively working to improve her situation, and I was allowing myself to be her emotional dumping ground. She wasn't being respectful of my space or my needs, and it was starting to affect my own mental health. I knew that I couldn't keep living like this, so I decided to have a serious conversation with her. I told Lauren that it was time for her to either start taking more responsibility for her life or find another place to stay. I explained that while I loved her and wanted to support her, I couldn't keep allowing her to live with me indefinitely. I told her that she needed to focus on finding a new apartment, looking for a job, and figuring out what she wanted to do next. She didn't take it well and immediately started crying. She accused me of being cold and unsupportive and said that she had no one else to turn to. She said I was kicking her out when she was at her lowest, and it made me feel guilty. However, after everything that had happened, I still felt like my boundaries were reasonable. I couldn't continue to let my life be put on hold for her, and I needed to take care of myself. She left that evening, saying she would find somewhere else to stay, but she hasn't talked to me much since. My family has reached out, asking why I didn't let her stay longer, and some of them think I was being too harsh. They say that I should have been more patient and understanding because she's going through a tough time. Now, I'm feeling conflicted. I still want to support Lauren, but I also feel like I was justified in setting boundaries for the sake of my own well-being. Am I the asshole for not letting my sister stay with me longer and asking her to take responsibility for her own life? So, Reddit, AITA for not allowing my sister to move in with me after she kicked her boyfriend out? AITA for confronting my friend after she used my trauma as a joke? I, 29F, have been friends with Sarah, 30F, for almost 8 years. We met in college, and over the years, we became extremely close. Sarah has always been the life of the party, and while she can be loud and sometimes over the top, I've always appreciated her humor and confidence. But recently, I've started to feel like I've been putting up with her behavior more than I should. A bit of backstory. About 3 years ago, I went through a traumatic event. I was in an abusive relationship for almost 2 years, and it took me a long time to process everything. Eventually, I got out of it, but the emotional and psychological scars have lingered. I've been seeing a therapist, and with time, I've gotten better, but it's still something I struggle with. Not long after I got out of that relationship, I started to pull back from a lot of people, including Sarah, because I needed time to heal. The thing with Sarah is that she's always been a little insensitive. She's never been great at reading the room, and I've had to call her out on multiple occasions for making jokes at the expense of others. I'm usually pretty good at brushing it off because I know she doesn't mean any harm, but sometimes it crosses a line. I've talked to her before about how I can't stand when she makes jokes about serious topics like mental health or personal trauma. She's apologized in the past and promised to be more mindful, but this time I wasn't so sure. So here's what happened. A few weeks ago, we were hanging out with a group of friends at a bar to celebrate a mutual friend's promotion. The night was going well, and we were all having a good time. At some point, Sarah started telling a story about one of her ex-boyfriends, and while she was laughing about it, she said something that caught me completely off guard. She was talking about how her ex had been clingy and overbearing and how she had to cut him off. Then she added, "It's like I had to break up with him the way I imagine my name must have had to break up with her abusive ex. You know, like, I'm sorry, I can't do this anymore, but also, you're probably going to stalk me for the next year, right?" I felt the air leave my lungs. Everyone else at the table laughed, but I felt frozen. My mind went blank, and for a moment, I couldn't even think straight. Sarah's words hung in the air like a weight I couldn't shake. She had just made a joke about my abusive relationship, something I'd never joked about with anyone. My trauma was not her punchline. I don't remember how much time passed, but I eventually found my voice. I looked at Sarah and said, "That was really out of line, Sarah." She looked at me, still smiling, probably thinking I was just playing along, but I couldn't keep the hurt from my voice. Seriously, that wasn't funny. You don't know what that experience was like for me, and making jokes about it like that is really disrespectful. Her smile faded, and she looked taken aback. "What do you mean? It was just a joke. I was talking about my ex, not you." I shook my head. "No, Sarah, you made it about me. You made my trauma a joke, and that's not something I can laugh about." There was a pause before she responded. "I didn't think you'd be so sensitive about it. I thought you were past all that." I felt my face go hot. You don't get to decide when I'm past all that. You don't get to dictate what's okay to joke about when it comes to my life. I've told you before that my experiences with trauma are not something I want to make light of, and yet you still think it's okay to do this. The room was silent now, and I could feel the eyes of everyone at the table on me. Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her seat and muttered, "I didn't mean to upset you. I thought it would be funny, I guess." I shook my head. "I get that you didn't mean to upset me, but your jokes still hurt. I've asked you not to make jokes about serious things, and you ignored that." After a few seconds, she said, "Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't realize it was still such a touchy subject for you." I wasn't sure what to say after that. She apologized, but it didn't feel like she understood the gravity of what she had just said. The rest of the night was awkward, and I couldn't really focus on anything other than how frustrated I felt. When the night ended, I left without really talking to anyone, including Sarah. I wasn't in the mood for small talk. Later that night, Sarah texted me, saying again that she was sorry and that she didn't mean to hurt me. She said, "I guess I just thought we were past all the heavy stuff and I didn't realize it still affects you so much. I don't want to be the kind of friend who triggers you or makes you feel bad." I didn't know how to respond. On the one hand, I appreciated the apology, but on the other, I didn't feel like she truly understood the depth of my trauma. It wasn't just about being sensitive. It was about respecting my boundaries and the things that I've been through. Since that night, I've been thinking about our friendship a lot. I don't know if I'm being too harsh, but part of me feels like Sarah just doesn't get it. She's apologized, but it feels like the apology is more about her not wanting to be in trouble than about truly understanding what she did wrong. I've told her before about my struggles, and while she's been there for me in some ways, she's also been dismissive of my boundaries in the past. A few of our mutual friends have reached out to me, saying they think I overreacted, that it was just a joke, and that I should let it go. They think I'm making a bigger deal out of it than I should. But I can't shake the feeling that this was something that shouldn't have happened in the first place. So, AITA for confronting Sarah about using my trauma as a joke? Or am I overreacting and should I just let it go? Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.